Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Today I'm here to show you how you can make your own rice or bean pack and what they're for and how you can use them. So what I've done is I already got a good part of the pack itself done. So I took some a couple of video clips, and I'll put them in here. But it's really as simple as deciding the size that you want. Now this is a standard size that we like. This one's been used so much, and I make it so the outside part, you can take it off and wash this, because this one is a rice pack and you don't want to throw this in your washing machine. Now you can wipe stains off and stuff if you need to, but what I find best is to make a cover for it. And what I did here is a pillowcase design, but for the cover for this newest one, I did do something different that I'll show you here in a minute. But these packs can be used cold or hot. Typically we use them hot, but you can throw them in the freezer for if you need to ice something. The nice thing about rice or beans, or the nice thing about those, is that you can shape them any way you want to how you're using them. And you can make any shape you want. Now the first ones I made, I simply used old socks, and I would put the rice inside a sock. This involves no sewing. Just put some rice inside a sock, tie a knot in it, and then have another sock that you can put over that, and that would be the one you would take off and wash. And I did do a video where I talked an instructional video on this before, and those ones I was making on order. I asked if she wanted covers for them. She didn't, so I just made them how she wanted. And I did one side in a nice soft fuzzy material and the other side just a standard cotton. And she wanted one that was like a big body size, and I put seams in it to separate it out to make it easier to use. And then, but for the smaller ones like this, I don't put any seams in there. And you can go watch that old video if you're wanting to see how I did the bigger ones. But I do find these smaller ones to work better for me. I did make one big one for us, and I didn't put any seams in it. I liked it. I like it just flat. And then I can shape it however I want. But that one I really don't use that much because it takes a long time to heat up. I find this size to be perfect. So let me go ahead and talk about how I'm making this one right here, and then I'll explain more about how you can use the rice or bean pack. So for this one, because I've been trying to be really careful about using the treadle machine because I'm still allowing my knee to heal, I decided, well, why not make this one by hand? And so at least the pack itself, so that people who don't have a sewing machine can know you can sew a lot of things by hand. That's the way it used to be done. And so this is right now right side out. And how I got started was I took my piece of material, and I have this stick here, a couple of these that Patrick made for me, and you can see I put lines on one side. So this is if I want to break down between 5 and 10 inches. But it's a 10-inch stick. You can use a ruler if you want. I use these for when I'm cutting out the 10-inch squares for the patchwork skirts. But I find I use this a lot more than just a regular ruler. The rice pack I have over here is about 9 by 8 inches, and I decided to make this one just a tad bigger and wanted it more square. So it is a 10 by 10. So how I did that to make especially since I was stitching by hand, to make the least amount of seams is first I did 10 inches wide and ripped my fabric along that 10-inch line. And I wanted the strip initially to be 10 by 20 inches. And I allowed myself a little extra. So I cut just a little better than 10 inches for my seam allowance and just a little bit more than 20 inches long. So after I got it ripped along the 10-inch mark, I then marked it at 20 inches and then ripped that across. And then I had my 10 by 20 inch rectangle, which then I folded right sides together so that I could stitch the sides. Now, if I'm doing this on my sewing machine, I always use a zigzag stitch, a nice tight zigzag stitch for the bag itself, because you want a good tight stitch that's going to hold, because it can be quite heavy once you put in your beans or rice or whatever it is you're putting in there. So, but since I was doing this by hand, there's 2 different stitches I would recommend. And for this one, I use the whip stitch. I find it to be faster, but if you're doing the whip stitch, you're gonna want to do those stitches pretty close together. Now you can see here on this outside seam, how close my my stitches are on this. And I did do a video where I broke down 3 basic hand stitches and the different uses for them. A back stitch is also a really good one because that's a nice strong stitch, but it's going to be more in a straight line. I just find that one takes a lot longer to do than the whip stitch, but I have used that back stitch before for such things. And I'm just finding I prefer the whip stitch in this case. So I whip stitched up the one side and then whip stitched up the other side. And when I did that, I started from the open end and then stitched it down that way, and then did the same thing on the other side, started from the open end and stitched it that way. So that I make sure it lines up correctly, because if you fold it and start stitching, it might end up shifting on you and it might not end up straight. And then at that point, I turned it, as you can see here, I turned it right side out. And then I started, you can see my needles in there. It's actually right at the end of the thread, so I'm gonna have to cut some new thread, but I just left the needle in there so I wouldn't lose it. And I went ahead and stitched it across a good part of the way, about 2/3 of the way across, and then just left an opening here so I can use that. Actually, the needle's taken up some of that, so that I could easily pour that in there. Now, you may want to use a funnel. The more you have this stitched up, the better it's going to be once you have it filled, and then you go to close it up with your stitches. Slip the fabric around your funnel this way. You can hold that in place, and it's gonna work better. And then I'm using black beans in this case because I've never made a bean pack. I've only done rice, and I was really curious to see what I think about using beans. And I decided the black turtle beans would be a good option because they're smaller. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour those in there. I just filled up a 4-cup measuring cup. It kind of slipped out there, so I'm still spilling it, but I'm doing better than I probably would have if I didn't have the funnel. Anyway, I wasn't sure how much I would need, and I'm thinking I'm still gonna need more. So that's 4 cups in there. But what you can do is you can pin this shut. Oh, and I forgot to say on this, you want to make sure you put a hem in that, that you fold it over. I just did about a 1/2 inch hem, and then you want to press that down. It'll make it easier for you to stitch that if you iron it down. And looking at this, actually that 4 cups looks pretty good. I still feel like maybe I might want a little bit more. So it's all going to depend on you. I think 1 more cup will do it. So I'm going to run back there, and I'm going to get 1 more cup of beans to put in here. Okay, well, this is more in a cup, but it's like 2 cups, but I'm just going to pour about half of that in there. Okay, let's see how that feels. Okay, I think that's going to be good. So you got to kind of press it out and see. One thing about having more in there is once you got it, it's going to take longer to heat up, but the more that's in there, the longer it's going to hold the heat. And this right here, the 5 cups, feels about perfect. And so then, of course, at that point, I'm going to need to finish stitching it up. So I'm going to cut that thread since there wasn't enough to finish that out, and rethread this. And then I'll do a few of these whip stitches right now. And then, of course, having a needle threader like this, especially when you got a teeny tiny hole, makes it a heck of a lot easier. And then you just put your thread through that little wire that you poked through the needle, and then pull a little bit of it through, and then pull that through. And then I always double over my yarn, especially when using cotton, because here's one of the things I found about using 100% cotton thread is that, I think I called it yarn, I mean thread, is that it tends to break a lot more easily than a poly cotton. So I don't think I'm going to buy 100% cotton thread anymore. I've been using it for years, but I find out it wears out a lot faster than poly cotton. I got my knot in there, so I'm going to put my stitch in place, and then in this case I'm going to go ahead and tie these 2 ends together so I don't have to worry about anything pulling through. Even though I already got my knot, I still want the end of that first piece to make sure it's secure. And then in this case, so whenever you're doing something like this, obviously on those stitches on the inside, if I needed more thread, I did not worry about this, but since this is on the outside, which no one's really going to see anyway, I tuck those ends inside the bag before I start stitching. I'm just starting to get back into hand stitching things, and so I'm not quite as smooth at it as I used to be, but with practice you do get better. But one thing I have found with the whip stitch is, like when you're doing a running stitch is your fastest stitch because you can just keep moving like that. You don't have to pull the thread through on every stitch. But with a whip stitch or a back stitch, you do, because of the way they work. Now you can try doing it this way, but you're going to have a harder time pulling your thread through if you have, the more stitches you have, like this. Obviously you still have to pull the needle through, but the more stitches there are, the tighter it is and the harder it is to pull it through. And so it doesn't save you any time doing your whip stitch that way. So you're better off keeping your thread shorter, not having it be too long, and then just, doing your stitch like that every time. And now one thing I will say on the inside when I did the whip stitch is I didn't put the stitches quite as close together and decided I should have. So what I did was I went back and just went over it again. So that's what I do on the machine anyway. I do a zigzag stitch and then I do a zigzag stitch back because I want to make sure that's going to hold good and tight. So this is going to be the test of time on this is going to be I'll find out how well my stitches are holding and if I did them tight enough. I might even still go back over this whole thing later just to make sure it's going to hold, because when you got all these beans and rice in there, it does make it quite heavy, and you're tossing it around, or the way you're using it can put some stress on those seams. So I still might go back over that. Or you can even do like the back stitch all the way across and then do the whip stitch. And that way you got two different types of stitches. Whoops. You got two different types of stitches holding it in place. Some of my beans spilled out because I laid it down not thinking. But anyway, I'm going to finish this out. All right, there. I wanted to at least finish that out so when I go show this other stuff, I can not have my beans spilling out all over the place. But I decided I am going to go ahead and stitch back over that just to make sure that's real strong, especially since I'm using the cotton thread. Okay, so now let's talk about this cover here. So I think a cover is really important if you're wanting to keep it clean, because it's something you can't just throw in the wash or even hand wash. And so you got to have something that you can put over the outside that you can wash on a regular basis. So what I did here, this one I did sew on my sewing machine, my treadle machine, even though I'm really trying to be careful with that knee. I tried using just my one leg. It's harder for me because I have very small feet. Some people, when they use a treadle machine, they use just 1 foot. But because I have very small feet, I wear a size, typically a 3.5 is pretty common in a shoe for me. And so my feet are shorter. I don't have as much leverage. And so it's far easier and I can move a lot quicker sewing with 2 feet. So I did this with just one so I could be careful with that knee. But what I did in this case, instead of doing the pillowcase style like this, where I just basically made it a slightly bigger than the bag, I decided it would be nice to have one where you could actually close it up so the bag's not falling out. Now you can see how this looks on the inside. That's because I wasn't sure if I wanted it tapered like this or just square across. That's going to be up to you. So I used basically the same measurements I used for this, but added a few more inches for a flap, and then plus a little bit more because I want it slightly bigger than this to make it easy enough to slip into this. And so on this one, I'll go ahead and turn it inside out so you can see. I did use the zigzag stitch on this, and you can see I lock over my corners. Same thing up here, and making sure that I folded it so that I had that extra few inches up there, and then hemmed it all the way around this part in here. And then I decided, after I got it finished, I decided I want to go ahead and fold in those corners and just have it tapered in. It really doesn't matter. I just thought I'd do that if nothing else so you can see what that looks like. And then I put my buttonhole in there, and my button, you could use Velcro. You could even just simply stitch a tie onto each side. If you don't want to flap, you could just put a little tie on each side, just keep it in place, and then just tie it once you have it on there. That was another option I thought about doing, at least with these. I got to be careful since I still have that needle stuck in there and I don't want to pull it out yet. But what you do is then you just stick your bag in there after you have it heated up or frozen, either way. So you got that in there, and then you just fold it over, and then now it's ready for use. I'll button it. All right, so now let's talk about how to use this. When it comes to heating this up, what we have found, and we've tried several different ways, because we try to do as much stuff with our wood stove in the wintertime when it's running as possible. And we tried various different ways of heating this on our wood stove, obviously not laying it on the wood stove, but setting it up like on some kind of taller trivet where it could get hot on there, and we'd flip it and then let it heat some more. But the problem we found with that is it did not hold the heat the same way a microwave does when you microwave this. So the number one reason we have a microwave oven, because we don't use it for cooking, is so we could have something to heat our rice packs, because it's the best thing to use. It holds the heat for a much longer period of time, and of course it's quicker as well. Now, I know some people who won't have a microwave in their house because they're concerned about the radiation exposure and so on. And so, but they use it for, their purpose is to use it for these kind of things. They keep it out in the garage or out in a shop or something. And so when they need to heat up their packs, they'll put it in there and then they'll leave the room. So if that's something that concerns you, that is a way you can do it. But I do still say you can just get a small, cheap microwave for this, and it's the best way to heat up a rice or a bean pack. And what I do, like for this, for example, I've been using this quite a bit for my knee to help it heal. At least twice a day I do this, is I take it out of the cover, because this is the dirty part. And then I'll stick this in the microwave, and then I'll heat it for about 2 minutes for this size. The size is going to make a difference on how long you heat it. And then I'll take it out and I'll move the rice around in there. And so it's mixed up well, put it back in, and then heat it for another minute. I find 3 minutes, sometimes a little longer, to be good for these. Again, it's going to depend on the size. But you never want to go the full time that it's going to need to heat up at once. You're going to burn the rice or flaxseed or beans or whatever you put in there, and it's going to stink. So it's best, especially with something like flaxseed. Like I think one of those ones I made in that old video, I did add some flaxseed, because the oils in it can hold heat for a long period of time as well. But flaxseed, the oils in flaxseed go rancid easily, and it can be very stinky. So I prefer plain rice when I'm doing such things. You can also add herbs in there, but they're only going to last for so long. You could even consider sprinkling a little bit of essential oils in there as well. Those might last a little bit longer if you're wanting the smell, if that's important. I don't bother with that myself. But anyway, then once my pack is heated, I then immediately put the cover on there before I use it in any way, because I might lay this on the floor. That's what I usually do with that really big one when I use it. I'll lay it on the floor and then lay on top of it. Well, obviously I want to keep the inside of the pack clean, which is also why, though, I take this off when I'm sticking it in the microwave, because I don't want that dirty thing in the microwave. Because like I said, you can freeze them, maybe even have one that you just keep in the freezer. What I recommend, though, if you're going to put it in the freezer, keep it in a Ziploc bag of some sort. It could be a silicone bag. It can be one of those other type of plastic bags that's reusable, zip bags. Anything that's going to help prevent moisture from building up, or just getting maybe food smells from the freezer. I recommend keeping it in a plastic bag, and then you pull it out and then you can use it right away. Take it out of the plastic bag when you go to use it. Now again, like I said, we don't use any of them cold. It's rare that we use ice for icing anything. Heat is our main go-to. And so this can be sore muscles, sore joints, or anything where you're trying to help speed up healing to that area. And one of the ways that heat works, besides just feeling good on sore muscles and joints, is that it's going to increase the blood flow to that area, which is going to carry the necessary nutrients and oxygen to help that area heal up faster. And then also the other thing we use these for is in the wintertime when it's really cold because we don't heat our bedroom. And if the bed is just like ice getting in there, then we can heat up a couple of these and warm the bed. Just think of like the old-fashioned bed warmers they had with the long handles. You could use the same idea with the rice packs and just kind of run them across there and warm the area and then shove it down to the end of the bed and then put your feet on it. Because it's usually, once your feet are warm, everything else, it seems like everything else is warm. If you can get your feet warm. So we use these a lot to keep our feet warm in the bed in the winter time. Oh yes, I forgot to say, I've even made some one for the dog. So when it's really, really cold in the bedroom, and when our old dog, Angel, when she got really sick and she needed heat on her chest, I made one specifically for her so that she would lay on that because she had kennel cough one time. I don't know where she got it because she was never around other dogs, but so I'd have her lay on that to help clear up her lungs. So that's something you can consider too. This can be good for helping to open up your airways if you lay it on your chest. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas and any suggestions you have of items that you can fill it with or how you use it yourself, then please share those in the comments down below. And don't forget to check out the videos and other information I'll be linking to in the description box. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.